Most multi-species swards contain a variety of species, hence the name. These can consist of different types of grass species such as perennial ryegrasses, Legumes, timothies and cocksfoots. They'll contain herbs such as chicory, plantain, sainfoin, yarrow, salad, burnet, but the two main herbs that we would use in our mixes tend to be plantain and chicory. We also have legumes in the mixes, which could be a lucerne, red clover, white clover, or bird's foot trefoil. This mixture that we're looking at today at High Milton has got red clovers and white clovers. So the benefit of all legumes is that they fix nitrogen through nodules on their roots. So they're essentially taking nitrogen out of the atmosphere and breaking it down in the dead matter and making it available to other plants such as the ryegrasses and the herbs that are in the mix. White clovers grow slightly different to red clovers. So white clovers have a stoloniferous growth, so they actually grow along the surface of the soil or just underneath the surface and are continually putting up new shoots from those initial roots. Whereas a red clover is a tap-rooted plant, so better for soil penetration because it's growing straight down into the soil. Because the clovers grow differently, they need to be managed differently. So a red clover, because it has a taproot, it has a crown at the base of the plant, so it's not very tolerant to hard grazing because when you damage the crown, you basically reduce the persistency of that plant. Whereas a white clover, because it's growing along the surface and continually putting out new stolons and shoots, it's more resilient to hard grazing, such as sheep grazing. This is a red clover plant. As you can see, it's got a longer taproot and just grows from a crown at the stem of the base of the stem. It also tends to have a more upright growth habit, so that's why you would typically see red clover in silage mixtures, because it will grow straight up the way and compete with your more vigorous grasses such as Italians and hybrids. And red clovers tend to have a bigger leaf than white clovers and a higher dry matter content than white clovers, but can be fairly similar in their protein content. You would be looking for little white nodules on the root hairs of your red clover plants, and this would be an indication that that plant is then fixing nitrogen. So a white clover, as you can see from here, this would be the base root, which has then been growing along the surface, and we've had these new shoots growing up, and these would be the clover leaves that you see above the surface. So again, there's lots of root hairs in there, and you can see little white nodules, and these are your nitrogen fixing nodules. White clover plants you can get in a small, medium and large leaf. Small leafed white clovers are better suited for kind of dense sheep grazing, whereas the larger leaf varieties we would tend to use them in silage mixtures because they're better at competing with your upright grasses that are grown and can intercept light more effectively. Okay, so chicory and plantain are herbs. This is a chicory plant. As you can see, similar to the red clover, it's also got a long taproot and it grows from a crown at the base of the stem. So you would manage chicory similar to that of red clover. So if you're cutting it, you'd want to cut about 8 centimetres, whereas with a white clover you could cut about 5 centimetres. And when grazing, you would want to leave about 8 centimetres. And that's just to prevent damaging the growing point, which then affects the persistency of the plant. Chicory is the one in the sward that looks a bit like a lettuce leaf, quite wide leaves, nice and soft and green. And the benefits to the chicory is, deep rooting, getting down, picking up extra trace elements and also picking up water where we get into dry conditions. So plantain is another herb. Again, a taproot, but you can see that this one has got an awful lot more root hairs. So again, getting slightly deeper into the soil, maybe just not as deep as a chicory, but it's just providing that diversity of root structures and depths in the soil, which is part of the benefit of multi-species swards in helping break up soil structure and improve soil health. Plantain, when you look at that in the sward, it's got these quite distinct ribs down the leaf, and again quite an upright growth habit, and you want to avoid basically letting it go to seed because it can get quite woody, as can the chicory plant. As a comparison, we've got a chicory plant here which was sown in July, and we've got a chicory plant that was sown in August 2021. So you can see the difference in the length of the taproot, but this also just emphasises the importance of how you manage that crop in the first year to enable those plants to have enough time to get their roots established before winter time, when they would go slightly dormant. This is a plantain, so it's the same. We've got a plant here that has just been established in July, and then we've got one that was established 2 years ago. So a huge difference in the root structure, and that really comes from good soil pH, good soil fertility, and managing that crop above ground so that you're not putting pressure on the roots below ground by grazing it too hard. Just to demonstrate the benefits of a multi-species swards in the differing species and their different rooting depths, we've laid out here a perennial ryegrass with relatively short root depths. We've then got a white clover, which is very shallow rooting, a red clover, which is actually got the longest tap root out of these plants, a chicory plant, and a plantain.